Right, breaking news coming in at this point. We're learning that the Cabinet has given a go-ahead to Home Minister Amit Shah to introduce a criminal law amendment bill. Now, this bill, remember, is set to replace the old pre-colonial criminal laws that exist already. The Prime Minister and his office have disagreed with two suggestions that was made earlier by the Parliamentary Standing Committee of Home Affairs, which would have far-reaching consequences, is what we're learning. But of course, the latest that we're learning is that our sources are saying a new criminal code is set to be tabled in Parliament as well. I have my colleague Sunil joining us for more details. Sunil, take us through what we can expect from this Parliament, this new bill, which seeks to amend the pre-colonial criminal bills.
Well, two important points that we must, tell our viewers. One, that the Cabinet gave this clearance on Friday, and over the weekend they have been working to finalize the Home Ministry, the criminal codes, which are basically aimed to undo what is pre-colonial things, the Code of Criminal Procedure, the Indian Penal Code, as well as the Indian Evidence Act. These are the three acts that are being redone. There is a controversy over the name, but the Prime Minister gave his final go-ahead after really going through many of the recommendations that were made by the Parliamentary Committee, Standing Committee on Home Affairs. Two controversial recommendations that they had made, and there were dissent notes to these, of course, apart from many other dissent notes from the opposition. One was on adultery, and on that, the Prime Minister as well as the Cabinet felt that women should not be neglected. Women's powers and rights must be respected. And it's in that fitness of thing that they didn't want to go against the Supreme Court judgment, which had made it very clear that you have to recognize both man as well as women. And something which the Standing Committee had said, is the essence of Indian society, the marriage and everything else. But finally, it was disagreed upon. And it was a political decision not to accept the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Home Affairs, where it had made those controversial suggestions in terms of, including adultery as a provision. Having said that, another provision which has been extremely controversial, which led to a 5-judge bench on Section 377 of the old Indian Penal Code. It wasn't there in the original one. The committee decided to include it and say that, where of course there is no consensus, then you should definitely no consensual sex between the same sex, then you should not, you should add other ones. But in this context, the Supreme Court had given its ruling. The Prime Minister's office, the Prime Minister, the Cabinet discussed this entire matter, and they have agreed to leave it as is various basis without any touching or inclusion. Section 377 had been struck down earlier by the Supreme Court, so those remain. What will, of course, remain a bone of contention for South India and the South Indian MPs is the naming of these bills, and those have been a source of big controversy, which many of them find it extremely difficult to pronounce. But nevertheless, the Cabinet's approval, it's all set to be introduced in Parliament and be taken up for discussion as early as Wednesday in the Lok Sabha, and early next week, if not on Monday next week in the Rajya Sabha, before it becomes a law.